Well, to talk more about the situation, we're joined now by a political analyst, Maupin from the United States. Thanks very much for coming on to RT this evening. Look, the police response so far to the situation has been pretty low-key, hasn't it? I mean, granted, it's not a hostage situation, but are you surprised by the response?
Well, there is a pattern in U.S. history of tolerance for right-wing demonstrations in ways that other demonstrations and protests would never be tolerated. And that's absolutely the case. You can go back to 1979, where the FBI coordinated with the Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazis to assassinate some left-wing activists. There is much more of a tolerance for these kind of demonstrations coming from the political right than there are for other protests. That's very apparent.
What should their response be, though? Because presumably defending the police for the moment, they're faced with a heavily armed militia or group of men, 150 or so, with weapons. Previously, there's been an instance similar to this where it was diffused by not doing anything.
Well, it's very apparent. If these men were African American or Muslim, this would be called terrorism, and everyone there would be dead. And that's pretty apparent to anyone who's familiar with U.S. society. However, I think the issue here is the fact that these ranchers have kind of become symbolic of the small middle class of property owners in the U.S. that has been deprived in the economic crisis. And I think that they have a wide level of support among especially their community. We can see that 300 people came out to support the Hammond brothers recently, and that they're kind of representative of a strata in U.S. society that is in decline in this economic crisis. Now, we know that on the scene are people from the Bundy family, and the world was horrified by the racism that Cliven Bundy just unleashed and just revealed to the world, just utter contempt for African Americans and hate. So the situation is really representative of a number of trends unfolding in U.S. society, some of which are somewhat contradictory.
Why do you think they felt the need to take up arms in this situation? I mean, you touched on a number of points there, and they obviously have sympathisers too across the country, but why not settle this through the courts?
Well, again, there does seem to be more of a tolerance for right-wing protests, and also there does seem to be a level of support for what they're doing. Just like the Bundy Ranch immediately got publicity, this incident is also immediately getting publicity, and there seems to be a network of people in the United States who do share their views, people with libertarian perspectives. You can talk about, the Montana Freemen. You can talk about the Sovereign Citizens Movement. Now we hear about the Oath Keepers. That this political perspective that the federal government of the United States is overreaching, and that there needs to be some kind of armed uprising in order to restore the rights of property owners. This is a common view among the declining middle class of the United States. It's very widespread. Many people in the U.S. have been taught all their lives that the greatest evil is communism, and so their reaction to the economic crisis is somehow believing that the U.S. is too socialist or too communist, and wanting to restore property rights, having contempt for the federal government. This is an ideological belief that really kind of blossomed in the 1990s as NAFTA was just destroying the Midwestern United States, and it's given rise to extremist movements. You can talk about what's happened with Timothy McVeigh, who blew up the federal building. I mean, there is an extremist right-wing grouping that does hail property rights and fights to defend property rights as its rallying cry, and this is an expression of it. It has widespread support, and that what's taking place in Oregon is really an example of how the U.S. is kind of destabilizing. Things like this are occurring much more frequently than they used to. There is much more contempt for the U.S. government from both the left and the right, and there's much more belief in the kind of things that U.S. government officials dismiss as conspiracy theories. So U.S. society is gradually destabilizing, and what's taking place in Oregon is kind of an example of that.
OK, we have to leave it there, but thanks very much for your thoughts. That was Maupin, a political analyst from the United States. Thank you.